Hi, this is part 6 of character rigging, and now let's look at how to go about animating your character. Keep in mind that this will be very experimental for you at first, and you'll get a better sense of how to go about doing things as you try them out. So remember that we did a freeze pose on 48, and since we're doing a dance routine, the movements are going to be pretty fast, which means you won't go too many frames forward in the timeline before you want to start doing something with your character's limbs, body, and head. So I've just moved over to frame 52, and for no particular reason, this will be experimental for me, and I'll click over here on Manipulate Bones. And I'll just do a couple of small movements. Maybe I'll get his arms up a bit, and maybe his body bent back a little bit, and the head, yeah, maybe back a little bit. I'll move forward a few more frames, and I'll do some other kind of a pose. Maybe move him back forward and have his head go down. And if you do this and you try and work with a few movements over a period of a second, maybe, and then play it back, you can see how the speed is, you can see how the movements are going, and you'll start to get a sense of what you can accomplish and how your character will look based on the kind of movements that you're making. So I'm not doing anything in particular. I haven't thought this through in advance or anything. Okay, so that was 1 second's worth. And if I go back on my timeline and push play, I can see if that was too fast, too slow. Okay, so that was pretty fast, but if I had really fast music, that might not be so bad. Or I might need to rethink that and scrub all that, delete all those, try again, but have these spaced further apart. If you did end up with a whole series of movements that you do really like, but let's say it's too fast. If I select all those, and of course I'm avoiding this first thing was the freeze pose. If I select all of these, and then I hold my Alt key down on my keyboard and grab and pull, it stretches out the space between them. And I've probably exaggerated this and now it'll be too slow, but clicking back and pushing play. Okay. Now let's say I like that, and let's say I think I'm going to repeat all of that motion. That saves time, and then I don't have to figure out, well, let's see, what was it that I did that I want my character to do again? I've got all these selected still. So I can go up to Edit, Copy, and make sure that I'm moving forward in the timeline that same interval, that same distance. So I'm about right here now. And then paste. So he's going to repeat it over again. And it may look awkward or not. It depends on, what was in between when I pasted that whole set over again. So let me go back and push play. Okay, that wasn't too bad because, he's dancing, so any movement goes. Now I've moved back to frame 150 on the timeline, which is where that last keyframe was at. And I'm going to go up here to Bone, and I'm going to click on Freeze Pose. So he's got all this movement going on. He repeated the movement again, and then this was the last thing that happened. Let's say I want him to go back to that original first pose that he has after a handful of frames. First I do freeze pose, and then I'll move up to about here and click on Bone, Reset All Bones. So, as I mentioned about freeze pose, and now you see about Reset All Bones, this is pretty much the equivalent to when you go up to Animation, Add Keyframe, except in this case, we're working with bones. So here's what happened. All right. We froze the pose. We made sure that all those bones were had new keyframes. And then we went to here and we reset the character to that first standing pose. So remember that if you're trying to move your character around and you feel like, wow, I'm just getting all of this really awkward drifting of the limbs and this isn't what I wanted, it may be that you need to insert a freeze pose before you go on and start moving other bones around. It really is trial and error until you get the hang of it. Now, one more thing, and you may not want to try this, but I need to move over on my timeline here. So I did a reset on all of the bones right here. And now I'm going to go up to Select Bone, and I'm going to click on this foot bone down here. And looking up here, there's a place for a checkbox next to Lock Bone. I'll click that, and I'm going to go down and choose the other foot bone and lock that bone. Now down in the timeline, I'll move a handful of frames, go back up to manipulate bones because I want to grab this control bone here at the waist, and I'm going to pull down. Now that other one didn't want to cooperate, but that's okay. There. So the feet were locked to the floor, and that enabled me to be able to do this really easily. If I didn't lock the feet to the floor and I tried to do that bend, it'd be more work because you'd have to resituate your character so that it ended up exactly where the feet were on the floor prior to trying to bend at the knees. And then if I moved again further along the timeline, and then I went up to bone, reset all bones. Okay, popped him back up. So he bends down and he goes back up. Now you won't be able to move anything here in the legs or the feet until you unlock those bones. And so at that point, once you got done with, if you wanted to do something like that, you'd have to end up here on this keyframe and go back to the select bone tool and click on your little feet bone again and uncheck the lock bone. So this can get a little bit tricky when you're new at it, but I wanted to show you that anyway. So do the best you can. It can seem very awkward at first. And also remember for the project, you need to insert the fade in and then put a fade out at the end of your animation. And that should be very quick and simple because you've already done the work on that template file several days ago. So good luck, and if you have any questions, please email me.